In this example, I want to talk to you about the auxiliary construction planes and how we create them. Typically, in the previous videos, we've seen that we were working basically in different planes, which were the XY plane, the ZX plane, and the ZY plane. Okay, but sometimes you need to create a drawings on a specific face of an object, which is not parallel to either one of these planes that we've worked on previously. So let me just make an illustration quickly. I'm just going to create a box. I'm going to put one of its corner at 0, and I'm just going to size it about, I don't know, something about this wide, and just pull it up about this big. So I have no clue how big it is, but we'll see once I'm going to start chamfering it. So I'm going to use the chamfer tool. I'm just going to right click here. And this is for editing my solid tools, okay? So we saw that we could edit the curve tools. The function below is to edit the surface tools. And you've got this one for the solid tools. So I can do a fillet and I can chamfer as well my solids. So these are the tools that I'm going to use. So this one is specifically for chamfering edges. So I'm just going to click on this icon here. And I'll talk more about this in the future. Right now I just want to chamfer it quickly, and I can see that it's kind of too small of a chamfer, so I'm just going to click on set all, and I'm going to change the value to, for example, something like 22, which seems to be acceptable, and just going to right click to execute the chamfer of 22 by 22 inches. Okay, so now let's say that I want to create a hole on that face, and obviously if I wanted to draw a circle and I go here, you can see that it's not working. It actually projected my circle into the XY plane. So I'm just going to undo. What I need to do is create a coordinate axis. So for example, if I go in ghosted mode, I'm just going to switch back to ghosted mode here. And you can see, well, it's kind of hard. I'm just going to hide this temporarily. So I'm just going to click and hide on the light bulb. And you can see that my convention was that the x-axis is in yellow and my y-axis is in blue. Okay, I'm just going to right click on the light bulb to bring back my geometry so that you understand how to work with with these axes. So to orient well your objects, you have to pay attention where the origin point is and where is your x and y axis. So in this case, I'm going to switch back to shaded mode. I want my x-axis to be along this edge and my y-axis to be along that edge. So to be able to do that, I just need to bring my cursor on the perspective tab, and I just right click, and I'm going to go and find the function that's called set C-plane. So C-plane stands for construction plane, and I'm just going to use one that I use all the time actually. It's 3 points that I like. So the first point that I need to put is the origin point. So I need to identify it. So on my snapping toolbar, I just make sure that I snap at endpoint, and I'm going to position here. So I've got here my origin point that is position, and now it's asking me for the x direction. So I can either snap in endpoint or in near, and I can snap along the edge like that. Okay, now it's asking me for the y direction, so I snap in near, for example, or at this endpoint. Either one doesn't matter, and I can left click and position my y direction, and you can see now that the grid has reoriented itself and now is completely coplanar with that face. Okay, and the origin point is here. So if I wanted to place a point and I type in 0, you can see that now it's at the origin at this corner that I've assigned. Okay, of course I can save my temporary grid, so I just need to go and right click on the perspective tab, go to set C plane, and all the way down here I've got named C planes, so I can create and save my my grids, my construction grids. Okay, so I just click on the little icon with the little diskette, save as, and I can leave it as set C plane 01, or just rename it the way whatever you want, and I'm just going to click OK on it, and here it is, it's saved. So I can close this little window, and again the convention, like I always said many times before, is that when you're in perspective view, the normal grid is the XY plane. So if I want to revert back to the original grid, I just right click on perspective, I go back to set C plane, and I set it to world top. So this grid matches the top the top viewport, it's the same grid like I've said before, okay? So here I am back to the original. And see, and so if I want to go back to my construction plane, my auxiliary construction plane, I just right click, I go to set C plane, and here you have C plane 01. So I can call it back whenever I need to work on it. So here I can start drawing, for example, my circle, and you can I just need to make sure that I deactivate because I don't want the snapping toolbar to snap to anything right now, and I can draw a circle on that face as you can see here. Okay, so let's say that you want to orient to have it perfectly centered, for example. There are many different ways of doing it. You can use the coordinate systems, you know, using the Cartesian coordinate systems if you want, but I find it a bit tedious, to tell you the truth. Maybe I'm going to use a smart track, and I'm going to put a point as the center of this face. So what I'm going to do is activate the smart track. I'm going to activate my snapping toolbar, and I'm going to just make sure that mid is checked on my snapping toolbar, and I'm going to place a point. So make sure that smart track is activated so it's in bold, and I'm going to bring my cursor to the mid of my first edge, and you can see that it turned into a gray point. So that means I can smart track along this vertical, and I'm going to find the other midpoint here, and you can see that the point turned gray as well. So now I can track on the X axis, and I find the intersection point, and I just left click and I position my point. Okay, so I'm just going to undo and repeat it again for you. So at first I just click on the points, so I can place a single point. So it says location of point object. Make sure your smart track is activated, and make sure that in your snapping toolbar the mid is checked. So now I bring my cursor near the mid of my first edge. You can see that it turns into a gray dot. So that means the smart track is activated, and I can travel along this axis, the vertical if you want. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to bring my cursor near the mid of that other edge. You can see that the point turns into a gray dot, and that means my smart track is activated. So now I can travel on the x-axis, and I find the intersection between the two, and I just left click to place the point. So that means this point is the center of that face, and that's very practical. This is the only time I use the smart track typically, to position my points on different faces, whereas you cannot use the center. I'm not convinced it's going to work. You see, if I activate the center, it's not going to find the center of my face. So that's why I use a smart track. Okay, so now that I've placed the point in the middle of that face, I can, for example, use my circle tool, and I can snap to point, and then I bring my cursor on that point, and I can draw my circle as such. Okay, so now I can, for example, extrude that curve. I can do curve, extrude, surface, extrude curve straight, and I can extrude in this direction. And if I want to close it off, and I'll talk more about that in future videos, I can select this. Now that I have a surface, it's open, so I want to close it. So I go now into the solids, and there's a function called cap planar holes, and I can close it, and now it's a closed polysurface in my properties window. The type closed polysurface. So I have a solid here, and I have a solid there. Okay, so that's how basically we would work with the construction planes. There are other ways of creating an auxiliary construction planes. So if you right click again on the perspective view, and I go to set C plane, you can reposition the origin point. So I can click on origin, and let's say that I want to change its origin and snap, for example, to the point. There you go. So now I've oriented my grid so that if I go into coastal mode, now I can see that my origin point has been relocated, but it's still on that face, for example. And let's say that you want to create a 2D view so that you can start creating some difficult shapes, okay, some very precise specific shapes. Well, it's very simple. I'm just going to switch back first to my shaded mode. I'm going to delete that cylinder. I don't need it for now. And let's say I want to draw on that face, but and I want to draw a specific shape. I need to be in a sort of orthographic view, so something similar to what you would see in the top view, front view, or right view, but I need to be orthographic to that face specifically. So I'm going to create, like you can imagine that the eye is looking directly straight down on that face and will allow you to sketch as if you were working in like one of these viewports. So it's very simple. I'm just going to maximize back my perspective viewport, and I just need to right click here, and I just have another function just above the set C plane. It's called set view, and it's a plan view typically. So I just click on plan view, and now I am working as if I was in orthographic mode. So that means that if I use my sketching tool, I can basically give any shape I want, but it's as if I was working in 2D this time, and I won't be doing any guesswork as if I was working in perspective. Okay, so if I use just my right mouse button, I'm not rotating, even though I'm in it says perspective. In reality, I'm working in a plan view, and I need to come out of this plan view to go back into perspective mode. So it's simple. I just right click, and I have set view, and I go and select perspective view, and I find my perspective view back to its normal view. Okay, so it's a way to work and project in 2D on a specific face, depending on your construction plane that you've created. And it's important that you orient your axis properly. Okay, so let's say that I'm going to change the orientation of my axis, and let's say I'm going to make this as my X. So I'm going to select this edge as my X-axis, and this is going to be my Y, and you're going to see what's going to happen once I'm going to be making a plan view projection. So you have to pay attention how your axes are oriented. So let me right click here, I go on set C plane, and I'm going to choose again 3 points. I'm going to switch to endpoint and check near, and I'm going to use this point as the origin point, and let's say I snap for my x-axis along this edge, and then I go along that edge. So now you might think, okay, nothing has changed, it's just that the color of my axis have been reoriented. But if I go and do a set view, and I go into a plan view, now my object is rotated by 90 degrees because the x-axis is oriented like this. Okay, so pay attention how your axis is oriented so that you can have a plan view that makes sense to you when you're going to start working. And again, I want to re-emphasize, when you want to leave that 2D view, that orthographic projection, you just right click back on perspective, you go into set view, and you select perspective. Okay, and again, as a reminder, to find the original grid that you have in typical perspective view, it's always the XY plane. So you have to select the world top view. So I just right click, I go into set view, set C plane, sorry. I select set C plane, and I select world top, and I find my old grid in the XY plane. Okay, that's how I come out of it. And again, I just want to have make a reminder quick for you. Right click, set C plane, and if you need to save it, you just go into name views to save, and you can make any saves you want. And to call back the grid, I just right click, set C plane, and there's C plane 01, and there's the grid that has been reoriented. Okay, so that's it for the construction. I'm going to do a couple of demonstrations in the following videos to better to make it clearer for you how I work typically with the C-plane projections. Okay, hope it was useful for you, and thanks for your attention.